Rule 14, duration of periods. A period in polo is 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The 7 minutes is played out entirely, and then the 30 seconds is considered an overtime for that period. Okay, so for every period except the last period, you'll hear a horn at when 7 minutes has expired, and then you have 30 seconds before you hear either a double horn or a bell or something like that. So during that 30-second overtime, if the ball goes out or a goal is scored or a penalty is called, the chucker's over. The penalty will be taken the next chucker, and the play will pick up where it last left off when the chucker ended during the 30-second overtime. Okay. With that being said, the last chucker is different than all the other chuckers. I have no idea why. Doesn't matter. This is the rule. In the last chucker, you play out the entire 7 minutes and 30 seconds. You'll still get a horn when 7 minutes is expired, and you'll still get a horn or a bell or a double horn or whatever at the end of the 7 minutes and 30 seconds. But the last 30 seconds is played out completely unless a goal is scored, then it ends before the time is expired. So in the last period, the only thing that ends that period, that 30-second overtime, the only thing that ends it is a goal being scored or the time expiring. The time expiring always ends everything. Just, that's obvious, but something to think about in the last period. So what I tell players is all you need to know is you play until you hear the whistle. Then when you hear the whistle, you stop playing. Simple as that. Stick to that and you'll always be okay. If your umpire makes a mistake, that's on him or her. It's not on you. So until you hear the whistle, keep playing. A lot of last chuckers, recently, after this rule was instated, the players they'll hear that first horn and the ball will be hit outside the goal and they all stop and start shaking hands. No, it was not a goal and the time has not expired. So the player will set the ball up for a knock-in. Don't shake my hand during that 30 seconds, please. Wait until the game is over. But they do it anyway because they're not used to the rule and they don't care because it's a 2 or 3 goal difference and nobody's going to score, so it doesn't matter. And they don't know the rule. So now play till you hear the whistle. I mean, you can stop playing if you want, but this is the rule. Okay. With that being said, should the game be tied at the end of the 4 periods or 6 periods or whatever your game is, should the game be tied at the end of all the time expired, you can go into an overtime chucker or you can have a shootout. And that's determined before the throw-in. It's actually determined at the beginning of the tournament by the host tournament committee. So host tournament committee, make sure your players know how they are going to resolve a tie game, okay? It's a little different in a round robin, and I'll explain that later. But in straight polo game, you have overtime period or you have a shootout. Overtime period is just like another period, except under the rules, it's exactly like the last period. So they'll play the 30 seconds out like that. If there's a foul in the last 30 seconds of an overtime period, it's just like the last period. We go ahead and make sure there's at least 5 seconds on the clock, and we take the penalty. Okay? So the only difference between the last period and an overtime period is that if somebody scores a goal, the period's over, the game is over. That's why it's called sudden death overtime, because your sudden death is the scoring of a goal. For the teams that didn't score the goal, it's their sudden death. So know that, okay? If the game's over, you're allowed a little extra time from the last chucker to the overtime period, kind of like a halftime. If your host tournament committee has determined that you're going to do a shootout instead of overtime, everybody knows that. The way the shootouts work is this. Time expires in the last chucker, score is tied. Okay, there's no overtime chuckers because that's already been determined, so now we're doing a shootout. The shootout works like this. We'll pick by lot which team goes first, you know, odd or even, flip of a coin, whatever it is that we happen to be doing at the moment. Each player from each team, in order of their position 1 through 4, will take a penalty shot from the 40-yard mark. And then each player of the other team will do the same. And after everyone hits, we'll count the score. And if it's not still tied, we'll have a winner. If it is still tied, we'll continue to do it, but we'll reverse the teams. So whoever hit last will hit first, whoever hit first hit last. That's just to be extra fair. But But we let everybody hit, and then we count score, and it stays from the 40. Now, just a quick note, this is not the same as a shootout for a tournament. A shootout for a tournament is different. And we'll go over that in the tournament shootout video. But basically, it's your best player from each team, and they do a round of 40s and then a round of 60s, and then they keep doing 60s until somebody misses. And in other words, we count the score after 40s and 60s, and then we keep counting the score after a round of 60s. I'll explain it much better in that video. Don't need to know it for here. Don't want to confuse you. Probably already confused you, but just listen to your umpire when it comes to shootouts. And umpires, don't mess this up. If you don't know, bring the rule book out. Look at rule number 14. Go down to shootout, and now you have the shootout procedure for an overtime period. Okay, it's different than a tournament shootout. Always confused me, but not anymore. Okay, rule 14.